not be here. Are there any council comments? Besides, where's the electricity?
Okay. That's all right.
There's some over here.
I could be Doug Berry for the night.
Sure, you could.
Is he going to be here?
No?
Awesome. It's an honor and a privilege to be Doug Berry. Maybe my speaking skills will ratchet up and sit in the public speaking.
Have some paper.
Thank you.
Just don't do like Councilmember Snipper, and when you come back up to the chair, have it scoot to the wall.
I need to do that.
Any council comments?
I have council comments.
Go.
This Tuesday night, there's a meeting with the Forest Park neighbors about crime prevention activities. And they're talking about reactivating their neighborhood watch. As you know, we've had overall lower crime levels across the city, which has been great, but they unfortunately had some really strange incidents this year, a series of random car vandalizing incidents and a fire in Forest Park. So we're going to sit and the chief's going to come and have a talk about safety and all those kinds of good things. So if you're interested, it's going to be on Tuesday evening, and I don't think they've settled on a place yet. So if you want to go and you're listening, send me an email, and I'll write back to you when I figure out where it's going to be.
And I'll just comment that I had the pleasure of visiting with the 3- and 4-year-olds at the Andrews Development Center today. They had career day for 3- and 4-year-olds. And what they mainly wanted to know in understanding what I do as mayor was, have I been to the White House? Have I met President Obama? Nothing else was as important as that.
After you gave the answer, how did they rate you as mayor then?
I had potential. And I also attended the first day of a 2-day meeting of the Chesapeake Bay Program Local Government Advisory Committee, of which I'm a member, and we met downtown, and after the meetings we had the pleasure to go on a little field trip downtown and got to have a tour of the Nationals ballpark, which is the first LEED certified ballpark in the country, and see all of the various green features of the ballpark, and also got to go in the dugout and on the field and in the press box and in the clubhouse. And it was not, everybody's biggest surprise was the clubhouse. It was very plush. It was more like a very nice living room, not what people expected from recollections of high school locker rooms. And we also got to see the U.S. Department of Transportation relatively new 3-year-old headquarters building in the same neighborhood, and that has a green roof that covers 1.5 acres. And we got to ask questions about their green roof, which was interesting to me since we're supposed to be putting a green roof on part of this building. And I got lots of resources for anybody who wants to go visit green roofs, which are open to the public in the district. And therefore, I'm still wearing my meeting garb. So I decided I would make it my city council garb tonight. Any other comments?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. There were just a couple of announcements I thought we should make. First of all, this Saturday, I believe the Tacoma Foundation and Tacoma Voice is holding the Azalea Awards. That'll be here at the Community Center at 5 o'clock? 5:30. And that's an annual event where local activists and volunteers are recognized for their contribution to the community. On Saturday morning, before the Azalea Awards at 9:30, the Ritchie Citizens Association is going to be cleaning up the valley behind the Piney Branch Elementary School, Park Ritchie, back in that area. It's called Tacoma Woods by some people. Anyone who's interested in helping to do the cleanup could meet the group at 9:30 in the morning at the parking lot across from Public Work entrance on Oswego Avenue. And Seemed like there was one more, but
House of Garden Tour.
there you go. Why don't you announce that one?
It's Sunday, I want to say May 3rd, from 1 to 5, and it's in the North Tacoma neighborhood. And tickets are available beforehand and the day of. And
How
think-
could I forget?
And you, in your swimming pool event.
There you go. Ward 4 is hosting a party at the Piney Branch Pool on May 17th from 3 until 5 p.m. And everyone's invited. Hope you all come out, and should be lemonade and maybe some other refreshments for after your swim. And that'll be 3 to 5 on May 17th. Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, it's time for public comment period. If anybody would like to speak on any topic, and if you could please identify yourself and please keep your comments to 3 minutes.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished members of the City Council, my name is Naveed Nasser. I'm a resident of Hillwood Manor in Ward 6. I'm a renter, and I'm a member of the Housing Indicators Work Group. I might add one of 6 renters who was privileged to be a part of the group. Our work group held 3 meetings between October and December of '08, spaced pretty evenly apart. Each meeting was supposed to last no more than 2 hours, but I can tell you that we frequently went over that allotted period of time, and I think it was to the credit of everybody involved that we stayed till the very end, no matter how long each meeting lasted. Within this remarkably short time frame of 6 to 7 hours, we as a group were able to articulate a clear vision for the kind of community we want to live in, list areas of mutual concern with respect to housing in our community, and then finally agree on a list of indicators that best measured where the community was at now and where it could be down the road. I obviously don't have the time to go through them all right now, but you should each have copies of the revised report and can look over them at your convenience. All of our concerns and all the indicators that we finally managed to agree upon stem from the vision that we set down in our very first session, a vision which I'm sure is shared by every member of the council and the vast majority of the residents of Tacoma Park, namely affordable housing, safe neighborhoods, diverse neighborhoods, energy-efficient homes and apartments, and access to public transportation. I can tell you that my own primary concern and the reason why I was drawn to the Indicators project to begin with is affordable housing. And if we do this right, if the funding for this project goes forward, these housing indicators will benefit homeowners and renters in a great many ways beyond increased resources and improved budget and resource allocations. For example, I can tell you that in speaking with Jim Kelly of the Charm City Land Trust in Baltimore, he repeatedly emphasized to me how vital the work of the Baltimore Neighborhood Indicators Alliance was in getting their community land trust off the ground. And for those who know the role that community land trusts play in ensuring that neighborhoods and communities remain open and affordable for all, I think this is how real, concrete, and vital the work that we're doing with the Indicators Project is, and why it absolutely should go forward. And in fact, speaking of that, there's no reason why in the near future our role and scope doesn't expand and take on some aspects of the Baltimore Neighborhood Indicators Alliance. In other words, we become sort of a focal point, a home base for people who are concerned about affordable housing in our community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and distinguished
Welcome.
council members. My name is Christopher King, and I'm also a member of the Tacoma Park Housing Indicators Working Group. And what I want to touch on tonight is the diversity of the working group. Our working group consisted of individuals of our community, and it truly reflected the diversity of the city of Tacoma Park in the context that we have diversity along the lines of gender, racial, ethnic, age, cultural, and we were able to have meetings and planning sessions that were synergistic in the context that not only did we meet and discuss, but we truly valued each other's differences, each other's opinions. And this afforded us the capability of providing or producing indicators that is a true reflection of the community and the working group. And as Navid spoke of, housing affordability, that's a key indicator that I'm concerned with as far as with this community. We also talked about public safety. We talked about one of the indicators is also neighborhood connections, interacting with members of our own community, how well we interact as a community. I think that's important that we monitor that. And again, I really like to stress the fact that as a working group, our differences only help to create a more dynamic, robust list of indicators that I think should go on as a project. Thank you for your time.
Thanks very much.
Good evening, Mayor and City Council members. My name is Wayne Sherwood, and I live at 218 Grant Avenue in Tacoma Park. I've lived here since 1991, and I'm a homeowner. I am also a member of the Housing Indicators Work Group. In my career, I've done a lot of research on low and moderate income housing and affordable housing. I believe that data such as that being collected by the Housing Indicators Project can be very useful to the City of Tacoma Park, the county, citizens, and community groups, and others in the private and nonprofit sectors. The following are just 3 types of examples of this potential usefulness. First, in measuring current status and continuing trends in community well-being, the data can be used as a baseline to describe current housing conditions in the Tacoma Park Long Branch area. If the project is continued, we would be able to measure changes over time in factors such as the physical condition of housing, housing cost and affordability, renter and home ownership rates, property values, and the accessibility of housing to transportation, jobs, schools, and community services. Second, the research data in the future could be tailored and refined to measure progress on the City of Tacoma Park's strategic plan. The housing indicators that we have chosen, if refined in the future, could be useful in measuring the city's progress toward many of the important goals and priorities contained in the city's proposed strategic plan for fiscal year 2009 to 2014. The following are a few examples of housing concerns that are mentioned in the strategic plan. A, housing in Tacoma Park could become too expensive for many families, threatening the socioeconomic diversity of the city. B, there is a need to have the county and state recognize any costs to the city's taxpayers that may be associated with having a higher proportion of rental units and lower-income households in Tacoma Park Long Branch than exists in other parts of Montgomery County, so that ways may be found to share these costs more equitably. C, there is a need to make all housing more energy efficient in order to lower housing and utility costs and reduce negative impacts upon the environment. And D, there is a need to measure the impact of developments such as the Purple Line on housing quality, housing affordability, and property values. Finally, the data from the Housing Indicators Project could be useful in securing funding from public and private grant makers. Using the Housing Indicators Report as a part of a grant application would, I believe, indicate broad community support for projects and grant applications and help improve their chances of success. The federal government, private foundations, and other grant-making institutions are looking for a high degree of community involvement and for locally developed measures of program effectiveness as a condition of making their grant awards. I therefore urge you to continue the city's funding for the Housing Indicators Project. Thank you.
Thank you.
A separate note, besides the Housing Indicators Group, I had a city flag for the last 10 or 15 years that is suffering what's called flag fatigue. It's falling apart, and I came to the city to try and buy a new flag, and apparently there are no flags of the great city of Tacoma Park available for purchase. This is a travesty. Now, I'm Hank Prensky, 7921 Sligo Creek Parkway, an owner in Tacoma Park, a local residential realtor. In my work with the Housing Indicators Work Group, I find that renters and owners in Tacoma Park have rather inverse concerns. Owners are worried about renters in their neighborhood, letting their properties deteriorate,
reducing the owner's property values, and they're fearful of those kinds of people who are renters. Renters, on the other hand, are afraid of further gentrification, of being kicked out for condo conversions, and of being priced out of the market and forced to move from the community they choose to live in. Both groups are somewhat overreactive and scared. The other major element of concern for both these groups is the intrinsic value of diversity in this entire community. What the Housing Indicators Project can contribute is real information to overcome fears and fantasies. We need to know the rate and pace of property appreciation, or sadly depreciation. We need to track the improving or deteriorating condition of rental housing in this area. We need to preserve and protect the diversity of our dual populations of renters and owners, as this is a stated value and long-term positive outcome identified by all parties. We can then find current programs to help renters become owners. We can measure the efficacy of any programs the city chooses to create or support to either increase home ownership or improve the condition of rental housing. Finally, we can support, improve, and enhance opportunities for both renters and owners to know each other, to become involved in mutually supportive projects and programs, and to provide human-scale knowledge to replace those fears, fantasies, and assumptions. I'll end by referring to the council. I'll end by referring the council to the greatest example of the type of interaction and improvement in human-scale relationships that I can remember. This was in 1990 when the city became a leader in the nation by supporting the Share the Vote campaign to allow residents of Tacoma Park over the age of 18 to vote in city elections without regard to their status as to being citizens of the United States, but only with regard to their interest in participating more fully in the life of this community. This was one of our most shining hours, and I believe the Housing Indicators Project can lead to others. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, good evening, members of the council. I am Kathy Porter of the 1000 block of Elm Avenue, and I am here again. You saw me earlier when I was here with Bruce Baker, who is the project director of the Community Indicators Project, and I'm so very happy that you got to meet several members of the working group this evening. The working group has been a wonderful group of people. As I think you've seen from all of the testimony they've given, they were very enthusiastic. They really took hold of the idea behind the Housing Indicators Working Group and ran with it. I'm here simply to reiterate that we feel that the continued support of the council and the city of Tacoma Park in terms of funding the Community Indicators Project is really critical, both to the continuation of the Housing Working Group, and they do intend to continue. This is intended to be an ongoing group that will be interested in the progress that the city makes and the community makes toward the goals that they've set forward, and also in the creation of two new working groups, one for health issues and one for local economic issues. Both of those will be set up very shortly. As Chris mentioned, it was a very diverse group. It included both renters and homeowners. Although Tacoma Park is more than half of its households are renters, it's been very difficult in the past to get renters incorporated with homeowners in many of the city's committees and commissions. But the Housing Indicators Working Group was very fortunate to have both renters and homeowners, both of them very dedicated and willing to give their time to this project. We were also very fortunate to have several people whose primary language was Spanish and to have translators from CASA of Maryland to translate for them so that they could participate in the discussions of the working group. They were not able to be here this evening, but they did participate and they did contribute very good ideas and a very worthwhile perspective. So again, I really encourage you to continue to support the Housing Indicators Working Group and the rest of the Community Indicators Project. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you all for those helpful comments. Anybody else? City Manager have any comments? Okay, then we'll move to our first budget work session item for the evening, which is Housing and Community Development, and the Director of the Department, Sarah Daines, is here. As you're getting seated, if I can just say that your presentation last year was very helpful and very appreciated.
That's it.
Turn that thing off. Yeah, and very much appreciated, and I know that a number of people were trying to model their presentations on yours, so we appreciate the skill with which you did yours, and we're looking forward to you meeting those same expectations tonight.
Or higher.
Thank you very much. At the risk of speaking out of school, is that the right phrase? I didn't make a whole lot of friends on the other staff. Did you want to start this out? Okay. Thank you for putting me first on the agenda. It's kind of nice to be here before 9 o'clock in the evening. Basically, what we've done is try to identify some of the highlights of the offerings of our department and sort of fit them into the goals and objectives that the council has identified during its strategic plan. Some of them are very clearly a good fit. Others are a little bit kind of wedged in there and sort of fall into a variety of different categories. So if things sound a little off, I apologize. Basically, our department has a variety of different divisions with a total budget of about $1.4 million. And our breakdown for that budget is a little different than the other departments in that because of the number of contracts for services that we enter into to make everything that we do happen, we have a lower percentage of personnel costs, but we still are fairly personnel heavy. If you go to the attached memorandum, what I'd like to do is not go through this point by point, but just kind of pick out a couple of the highlights of each of the individual priorities, starting out with sustainability. As far as the financial sustainability of the city organization itself, one of our primary functions is grants management, and that includes identifying, securing, and managing grant funds. If you note in your current budget, or the budget for FY10, roughly $700,000 of the budgets that are included within the special revenue funds are programs and grant funds that our department has secured for specific projects, the bulk of those being capital. We also continue to monitor funding availability at the state and county level, as well as at the federal level, though frankly a lot of those funds are not specifically available to municipalities. In cases where there's funding available through the economic stimulus package that's being implemented at the federal level, many of those funds are not, the city's not eligible to apply to, but we are working with this county to see how many of those can be directed into Tacoma Park, specifically for affordable housing or economic development. But we're also looking at ways that we can forward the information to those entities that might be able to qualify. So for example, Mr. Sherman is in the audience this evening, had sent us some information about funding that was available for specific entities to do retrofitting to make properties more energy efficient. That information was conveyed to those particular multifamily housing property owners that would qualify for that funding, and the offer has been made to assist them to the greatest extent possible in securing those funds. And many of them are already aware of it or are looking at ways that they can take advantage of those funds. Under environmental sustainability, these projects are diverse enough that I'm just going to touch on each of them. The first is the New Hampshire Avenue Community Greening Project. This is focused primarily along the New Hampshire Avenue corridor and deals not just with community gardens, if you will, but ways to make, which is basically an asphalt corridor, a little greener and a little more environmentally friendly. At this point in time, we're working with 3 different entities that have either secured funding or are in the process of securing funding through this program. Hillwood Manor is looking at They've started a small community greening project near the, I've forgotten the cross street, Erskine, I believe?
Probably.
Thank you. And New Hampshire Avenue, and they're looking at expanding that. And as a result of the efforts of our staff, they've been able to work and coordinate a lot of their efforts with the Parks Department, which has been beneficial for both the neighborhood, city, as well as the county. Zion Evangelical Lutheran Church has just received funding for a greening project on their property that will again beautify the corridor and increase the environmental sustainability of that particular property. And we're working with Councilmember Robinson in the Pinecrest area to do some improvements there that would help facilitate the Community Gardens project, which you heard about at the last meeting, I believe, when the Parks Department was here. The Safe Roads to School program, I've included under this particular category because it frankly promotes walking and biking safely to school by both parents who have gotten in the habit of dropping their kids off, driving 2 blocks and dropping their kids off, and encouraging the children to walk and ride to school. And it includes programming expenses as well as project expenses or capital projects. The capital projects will be sidewalks, which are identified once the sidewalk study is completed that Benita George and the consultants presented to you a couple of weeks ago. Programming will include a continuation of the Walk to School event that many of you have participated in. And this year, for example, we're doing a fun run for the first time, which is on May 3rd in the morning. So if you want to run your 5K and then go to the gardens tour, House and Gardens tour, it would be great. I spoke with Lucy who's coordinating that project, and as of this afternoon, we had over 100 people that had registered for that. So if you're interested in getting some exercise, or at least watching other people exercise, come on down. The third project that we've included under this category is the Crossroads Farmers Market. This would be the 3rd year that market has been in operation. And with the death of John Hyde, it's been a little problematic in terms of its continued operation. We have met with Mr. Hyde's widow, and who's been very involved in both the market in the Old Town area as well as the market up in the Crossroads. The former market manager of the Crossroads, as well as some of the vendors that have participated in the market in past years, to see if there's a way that we can make this happen again this year. It's not a done deal, but I'm quite confident that we'll be able to do that with the support of the council in terms of allocating roughly $10,000 for that endeavor. We've also included funding in the budget for continuation of the bus service between the community center and the market on Wednesdays. It may not be every week, depending upon the programming that the rec department is offering, but it, again, is a way of encouraging people to take advantage of the locally grown food and to further their WIC and food coupon, or food stamps. Economic sustainability is probably the largest category that a majority of our programs fit under. And it falls into essentially 4 categories. Housing, we've got affordable housing programming. Those are sort of soft costs in terms of programming for workshops that we are proposing, continuation of our involvement in the Montgomery County Housing Fair, continued support of the Council of Governments Housing Trust Fund, and then we're also looking at other options that would be appropriate under the use of these funds that we'll be presenting to you later in May when we're slotted to come before you for the City Council's Housing Action Plan. There are also capital projects associated in this category that are available through the Community Development Block Grant Program. And because the way the program is structured, those costs can basically have to be for capital projects. We can only spend a certain percentage of the Community Development Block Grant award for public service or community service types of projects. And again, those specific recommendations will be presented to the council later in May and could deal with a variety of things from gap financing for projects like the Montgomery Housing Partnership is undertaking at Maple Towers in Councilmember Seaman's ward on the corner of Maple and Ritchie Avenue, where these funds could be used to provide some additional resources to leverage further renovation of individual units that are affordable low and moderate income people, underwrite purchasing or acquisition costs, a variety of things like that, but it would have to be a hard cost or capital cost. The other largest category we have under this economic sustainability is are the initiatives that we're undertaking in the New Hampshire Avenue corridor, and those range from one-on-one business support for all of the enterprises that are located along that corridor, to working with developers that are interested in redeveloping in the area, working with businesses that would like to expand, providing limited small loans or grants for various site improvements, facade purchases or facade easement purchases through the block grant program, and then also marketing and promotion of the New Hampshire Avenue corridor. And those activities would range from publications and printing costs to additional tours that, like we did a couple of weeks ago along the corridor, as well as the management and the hosting costs associated with the new website that we're hoping to launch in the next month. I'm hoping that will be the case. Some of the small projects that have been working with right now we've got about 9 businesses that have taken advantage of the funds that have been made available through the Community Legacy Program, and that's ranged from the replacement of signs that were so faded or in such disrepair that you could really no longer tell what they were, to the installation of fencing to hide from view, storage in back lots or back segments of businesses that operate along New Hampshire Avenue, to larger renovation project including the replacement of existing doors and windows, tuck pointing, painting, things like that. The third largest category under this particular economic sustainability goal is the work or the funds that are allocated for the Old Tacoma or Old Town Tacoma Junction area. We have included in our budget, and I would strongly encourage the council to authorize it, is an allocation of $30,000 to the Old Tacoma Business Association to offset their operating expenses. With that $30,000, the organization is able to do a variety of things, including staffing 4 volunteer committees, coordinating volunteers as a whole, and generally providing services that our department is not in position to provide at this point in time. They also administer a similar facade or business or building improvement loan that they were able to secure through the Community Legacy Funds. So they do a lot of these activities that the Housing and Community Development Department does, but do it on site and are more directly involved with some of the businesses. We also have funds that are targeted for the Old Town Tacoma Junction area through the Old Tacoma parking lot improvements. And this is the balance of the Community Legacy Funds that we've received, a majority of which have been invested in the last of the streetscape improvements along Carroll Avenue, and would be made available to private businesses on a loan basis that were interested in making improvements to the parking that they have, off-site parking that they have available, and encourage them to, or require them to increase access to those areas, not just to their employees, but to the public as a whole. So it's one way that we can increase the availability of parking in that area, as well as improve some properties that, for one reason or another, the parking lot surfaces have become deteriorated. The parking area itself is difficult to find because it's poorly signed. There's no greenscaping, a variety of things like that. For that particular program, we're looking at a minimum loan of $5,000 with variable terms depending upon the amount of the loan funds that are actually made available. On a citywide basis, we have the Gateway Signage Program, and I know that's of great interest to Councilmember Siemens. This would be the third phase of what has been a well-received and fairly successful project. I say fairly successful in that it initially included some directional signage, but because of state regulations regarding how those signs can be presented, we were unable to include that component of it, though we're still continuing to work with them, but it's not promising. About a month ago, I believe, you approved a contract for indefinite quantities for signs that will be installed before the end of this fiscal year. And that will include a number of gateway signs that we were unable to finance in the first round. We'll wrap up the designation of the signage of the historic district, the boundaries. And we'll also be doing a variety of the tertiary gateway signs, those little circular signs, many of which will be going up in Ward 4, Ward 6, and Ward 5. Well, frankly, all of them except probably Ward 1. Those areas, the primary entries into the community were assigned with the first round, and now we're going to pick up the pieces that we were unable to finance the first time around. Those are areas where it's not clear when you're in Tacoma Park and when you're not. And we've had a number of requests from property owners, particularly on the eastern side of New Hampshire Avenue, that says we really would like to get our sign so that people know that we aren't in Prince George's County, we are in Tacoma Park. And those are things that we're looking at. Next year, the funding would allow us to purchase additional kiosks for the old Tacoma area as well as the New Hampshire Avenue corridor. We found that to be quite effective in terms of increasing pedestrians' awareness of the businesses that are in the area and to provide them with some directions in terms of how to get to where they can go shopping. And we're also looking at doing a replacement of some of the more deteriorated parks signs and other signs, working in partnership with the Public Works Department on that. The last of the largest categories under economic sustainability are, which kind of fall into category of community service, and those are small projects that we are able to finance through the Community Development Block Grant Program. Includes food distribution with the support of Manna Foods, a healthcare program over at Victory Tower that the Columbia Union College Nursing School will be doing. Ministries United is providing financial and technical support to families at risk of losing their housing. And then we have Digital Bridge, which is could be considered a job training program to increase people's comfortability and literacy as far as working with computers. Those four particular projects total roughly $30,000 and have a direct benefit for low and moderate income individuals. And those are projects that we would administer the funds and oversee the contracts, but those services are actually provided by another agency. Under the livability category, I'm just going to focus on a couple of these. Some of them are very self-evident as far as continuation of the property maintenance inspection program, which includes our targeted inspection program. I know that there's been some interest in the rental housing licensing program. The largest cost there is a contract that we have with Montgomery County Department of Housing and Community Affairs with their code enforcement staff. A couple of years after I started, a decision was made to subcontract that out to the county. And frankly, it's been the best decision I ever made or encouraged the council to make. It has been hugely beneficial in terms of improving the quality of housing that's available to the community in the renters. And it has, we've been able to develop a very positive working relationship with the county as a result. And coordinating enforcement efforts in specific neighborhoods, it has improve the quality of housing to such an extent that we receive fewer complaints from tenants about the condition of their properties and are able to develop a more positive working relationship with many of the landlords, at least those that have gone through a couple of inspections by the county, because the first couple of years they were not very happy because they conduct code inspections a little more rigidly than previous code enforcement staff had done at the county or at the city level. What they do for us is inspect roughly 3,000 units a year on an annual or biennial basis. There had been some discussion about dropping that down to 2 years or 3 years. And in speaking with staff, the concern on our part is that gap would allow the progress that we have made to improve housing conditions and for the rental properties to fall backward, take a couple steps backwards. We're also concerned that because of the state of the economy, the cost of housing outside of Tacoma Park, and the hesitancy of some tenants to report code violations because they're concerned, rightly or wrongly, that they could end up losing their housing in retaliation for that. It provides them with an opportunity to continue to have their property maintained without necessarily having to call us and complain about the owner of the property. So it's kind of a passive way of making sure that the interests of the tenants, particularly as far as some of those basic maintenance code concerns, are protected. And then also along those same lines, we have a continuation of the Clean and Lean program and abatement program. We haven't accessed the funds as yet. We have a similar amount budgeted for this year, and I'm hoping to be able to access them for the demolition of a property in Ward 2, I believe, on Allegheny. But it will depend on when the bids, Ward 3, excuse me. That's right, it is Ward 3.
Step back 1 second again. Start that.
Ward 3, the city, we have included in the budget funding for what we call the Clean and Leaner abatement program, so that when the court issues an abatement order, if the property owner, and basically an abatement order is you have to fix all the violations within a defined period of time. If not, you're in contempt, and the city can go ahead and do the work and then bill you for that. It doesn't happen very often, but we do get cases where the property owner is unable or unwilling to correct the code violations. There are a couple of properties in Ward 3 that have serious or ongoing property maintenance concerns, one of which is on Allegheny Avenue, and I can't remember the property right now. It's basically abandoned, and the property owner is nowhere to be found. That should be torn down for the safety of the community as a whole and the neighborhoods in specific. So we're in the process of issuing a demolition permit for that in accordance with the court order that was issued in district court. This would allow us to continue to do that. There aren't a whole lot of properties that this would apply to, but those that it would are serious and expensive to fix. Any costs that would be incurred by the city to do something like this, be it as simple as mowing the lawn or tearing down a stairway or something like that, the property owner would be billed. If they didn't pay within 30 days, they would be billed again with a late fee. And then I believe about this time of the year, the finance department, working with us and the city attorney's office, files a lien against the property, and it goes on their property tax records, or property taxes, and they have to pay it. Otherwise, then they have to go, they run the risk of losing their property. So it all comes back to the city, but it's not going to be right away.
Do we have a say on when that property goes to tax sale? Or is that in the hands of the county? If it were to go to the
It's
tax sale?
regulated in terms of how soon it can go, but
Yvonne might be able to help me out, but it's a set time period every year, and Yvonne can address that.
Yvonne Brooks, Finance Director. Normally what happens is now, the county puts it on the real property tax bill, so they have basically a year cycle to pay it. And once it gets to the point that it's not paid within that year, that's when could possibly go to a tax sale.
Right, who makes that decision?
It's all in the hands of the county.
Okay, that was my
Once we
question.
turn our accounts over to the county, they collect the accounts. We can't, at that point, collect anymore.
Okay, thanks.
thank you. Under the last priority of this council was developing an engaged, responsive, and service-oriented organization. The biggest expense, or under that category, is the tenant capacity building program. We've started this about 3 or 4 years ago, and contract with 2 folks that speak Spanish as a second language, have a lot of development experience, as well as organizing experience. And that has been also a very successful program. Historically, they've been greatly involved in working with tenant associations when all the rental units were going up and being converted into condominiums. While that activity has lessened, the demand for the skills that they bring to the city has not necessarily. This past year, they've been working with 10 different projects, some fairly straightforward in terms of just getting a tenants association organized or helping them deal with an issue that as a group they would like to work with their landlord to correct. To others, like over at Tacoma Overlook or Hampshire Towers, which is a much bigger project and has created a lot of tension and anxiety among the tenants. And they've been instrumental in helping us facilitate that discussion and get the tenants organized to respond collectively, which our experience has been that that's much more effective than one or two people filing a complaint.
When you say pursuing the purchase of their rental facility, does that always mean condo, purchasing it and condoing it, or are there other instances where tenants purchase their building and it doesn't go condo?
All tenants, regardless of the size of their property, have the right to purchase it if the owner decides to put it on the market.
Right.
So single-family, people that are renting single-family houses have the same rights as the folks over at Hampshire Towers had to purchase it. The rules are a little different and the time schedules are different. The capacity building folks, we do not work with the single-family residences.
Right, it
to
says
purchase
here,
that.
guide tenant associations pursuing the purchase of their rental facility. So my question is, has that happened recently, or are there plans to assist tenant associations in purchasing their buildings? And if that's the case, if that has happened, is the pursuit to create a condominium and then they purchase the condominiums separately as tenants, or is the intent to create a co-op housing and they purchase then a slice of the corporation that then entitles them to be in their apartment, or have you gotten that far?
We've done a number of projects that they're all different.
Okay.
When the tenant association is given an opportunity to purchase, we meet with them, describe what their options are and what the expectations are and the rules and procedures, because it's very specific as far as deadlines that have to be met. Folks are given the option of transferring their development rights over to another entity and having the property remain rental, which has happened on a couple of occasions. There's a property over on University Boulevard, I believe several of you may have attended the opening event for that, where the tenants elected to transfer their rights over to MHP with the stipulation that it remain a rental. Others have developed properties on their own specifically to do condominiums and not elected to do cooperatives. Others have transferred their development rights to an organization, private and nonprofit, or for-profit as well as nonprofit, with specific agreements as far as how that property would be developed. And historically, they have been condominiums. And then once the tenants association or the building has gone condo and the renovations are completed, then the individual tenants have the right to purchase their individual units.
I see. Okay, thanks.
And then organizers don't work with the individual tenants. They work with the association as a whole. And then lastly, under this are some of the educational programs that we do. Councilmember Siemens this is my visual prompt for the day.
Are you visual?
Well, you're a visual, yeah. We do a lot of educational programming, one of which is landlord-tenant certification program. And if you are so inclined, you can come and we will go through this book for you in 90 minutes flat. We also do similar types of things for tenants and are going to be starting to do that with landlords for the fair return rent increase petition process. Other things that we do that I believe support this particular goal is the community outreach that we do. We have more meetings than you can shake a stick at, just to make sure that our projects meet the needs of the community. address their concerns and are successful in their implementation. We also work a lot with other organizations at all levels and with all varied interests, from the arts to transportation to economic development, affordable housing, to partner with them. Either sometimes we can't bring very much to the table, other times we can, but we do continue to try to promote those types of partnerships with different organizations. And then last but not least, we also staff a wide number of boards, commissions, and committees, that some of which are established by the council. Others are business association committees or organizations that we staff, as well as special projects. And that's my spiel. Does anybody have any questions?
Thank you. Questions? Councilmember Clay.
I know we've talked about this before. We've probably answered this question before. But let's go back to the notion of the rental licenses and the inspections and the fees that the landlords pay for a rental license. What's an average fee per unit for a rental license?
We have a flat fee. It's $94 a unit, and that applies to single-family homes or multifamily homes.
Now, you know, I have a single-family rental house in College Park, and I pay $250 a year. Plus, every 6 months, I pay $180 for them to come and remove the trash, even though I pay the same taxes that every other single-family home on the block pays, and their taxes pay for their trash removal. But because I'm a landlord, I get to pay an extra $180 every 6 months. Do the fees that we charge the landlords pay for the cost of these inspections?
Yes. Maybe not on an individual by individual basis, because frankly, it's easier to go through 12 apartments that all look alike, or it's faster to go through 12 apartments that all look alike versus a single-family standalone house and the grounds. So there's, the smaller the property, the longer it could potentially take to conduct the inspection. But generally, there are fewer violations, so there's less paperwork on the other end of it. The larger the property and the more consistent the layout of the structure itself, you can go through and do some of those inspections in 15 minutes, but those tend to have hundreds of violations. Not serious, but hundreds of violations that all need to be written up, so there's a lot more paperwork on the back end. The fees that we collect, based on some calculations that we did, they'll be roughly $300,000 for FY10, assuming a fairly flat inflationary rate. Actually, I did it 0%, and as you all know, the rent increase allowance this year is pretty close to zero. They cover the costs of the contract with Montgomery County, and then also pretty much cover all of the staffing costs associated with the licensing activity. So it pays for itself. It's my understanding that fees that the city charges cannot be viewed as a revenue generator, but have to be associated with the costs incurred for that particular service or program.
That's my understanding.
Yeah.
Which is why I was going to ask, because you know, we were talking about could you go to every 2 years or even every 3 years, and if you did that, then you wouldn't have a justification for charging whatever it is you charge for the current licenses. Is that correct? So there wouldn't really
That's my understanding.
There wouldn't be any savings to go to a 2-year pattern or a 3-year pattern, because you wouldn't be able
There
to
would
charge
not be any
them.
savings, and it would be difficult to document, but there is a possibility it would actually end up costing you more, just in terms of the additional demand for COLTA hearings and further investigation, and that if the properties themselves are not maintained or inspected on a regular basis.
So I looked at the fee schedule for College Park, and, you know, single-family house is at the top of the fee schedule, but
Right.
I don't think that there's a fee schedule that drops below $94, and they do inspect the house every year, but it's hard for me to imagine that
we're paying for all the same things that they're paying for $94 when they're charging $150 and $250. Are we really including in the $300,000 budget all of the staff and the items that go into managing the rental program, or?
I believe so, yeah.
Yeah?
Staff
More
doesn't,
efficient than College Park.
well, College Park is very unique. I mean, if you look at it in terms of the rent stabilization, it's totally flipped from ours.
Yeah,
So-
but they just did that.
Yeah.
They initiated that after I bought the house. They had the fees long before they did that rent stabilization thing that they did.
In other jurisdictions, the fees for single-family properties, for example, are higher, again, reflecting the time involved in those particular properties. I'm not sure why there's just a flat fee. Frankly, from an administrative standpoint, it makes things much simpler. And overall, it does cover the cost of the program.
Okay. Second question. I'm looking at the different funds that are available for affordable housing, and I noticed that there's $115,000 in CDBG
Correct.
money for affordable housing, and then there's $50,000 for affordable housing that has yet to be programmed. Is there any reason why we couldn't pay for the $25,000 for the Indicators project out of that?
The $50,000, you would not be able to pay for it out of the CDBG program
No, but the
funds.
$50,000 isn't
$50,000.
listed in, it's not listed in the,
Right, that would be a council decision. Those are funds from the sale of the property on Piney Branch and are general funds and have no restrictions,
it's on
or
page
don't have the
47.
same restrictions as the $115,000.
Okay, well, I'm going to recommend that we do that. Other than that, thanks for all the detail in the document. It's very helpful to look at everything. But yeah, I think I would like to see us go ahead and do that, especially since we have. You look at all the different affordable housing funds we have, and we have the CDBG money that's coming out. Might be a good use of that.
Questions? Councilmember Wright?
I also wanted to talk about the fees associated with the inspections. Thank you, Councilmember Clay, for clarifying the paying for itself aspect. But I do want to question whether we really are having it pay for itself. So I'd like us to look more closely at the accounting, because I don't imagine that we're factoring in all of the capital and overhead, for example, to have that person there, right? So we have some staff cost, our own personal staff costs associated with it, right? Are we charging the rent for the bill the rent in quotation marks associated with the building, electricity?
We don't have.
The percentage of some senior manager's time that it takes to manage that person?
It includes the a percentage of the program assistant that does a majority of the paperwork involved. It includes a percentage of the time of the code enforcement coordinator who oversees the contract as well as the program, supervises the program assistant and does the final review on the licenses. It includes a little bit of my time. It does not include any overhead, electricity, or things like that. We don't track that expense, or we have not tracked that expense. But from a staffing standpoint, yes, we can go back and redo the numbers. But the last time I investigated it was.
Because it seems like, and my second question related to that was, is there a license rental fee in Montgomery County?
Yes.
And what level is that fee?
I think it's lower.
Lower than our 94?
I can go back and check. We, a couple of years ago, when the council was going through and redoing the ordinance, we did some research because we were looking at ways to increase the fee, just because it seemed to make sense at the time. And the fees that we were charging were kind of in the middle of the range.
And just following up on that point, do we have a process for increasing the fees based on some factor, or is it just whenever we decide that we need to look at it and do it?
When we went through and revised or recodified that particular section of the code, we added an annual escalator. So Every January, I go, I go and look to see what the consumer price index has increased for that particular time period, applied to the previous year's fee, and we have a new fee.
And just one other quick one on that same point. The staff costs include fringes?
Yes.
Thanks.
And just so I'm sure I'm clear on the accounting, any of the grants management stuff, any of the special revenue fund projects in here don't flow back through the department, right? So if I were looking at the department and trying to figure out what the costs of the department are and the revenue associated with that and what comes out of the general fund, I don't have to worry about the special revenue funds, all the grants. Is that
Right, that's correct.
Okay. A little bit curious about what the Council of Governments Housing Trust Fund is that we pay into. What exactly is that?
It's a fee that's calculated on a per capita basis, and those funds are, it's a housing trust fund. Each of the members of the Council of Government are encouraged to support, based on this formula, the activities of the Housing Trust Fund, and it is a pool of money that's available to primarily nonprofit housing providers that submit applications to it and do projects throughout the region. So, for example, if Montgomery Housing Partnership had a project that would fall within the criteria of this particular Housing Trust Fund, they can access those funds. There have been, I don't believe there have been any projects that, I take that back, when Community Partnership or Community Preservation Development Corporation, CPDC, was initially involved in the Hampshire Towers project, they had secured funding through this Housing Trust Fund to offset some of the costs of acquiring the property and renovating it. So it's for a fairly small amount of money, the potential is there to access a fairly large sum to further the renovation or acquisition of affordable housing in Tacoma Park.
Okay. In your opinion, you talked very articulately about the Old Tacoma Business Association and the funds we gave them, and you were very supportive of that. I'm sort of curious, if you had to do those functions in-house at the city, what do you think that would cost the city?
I can tell you exactly.
I mean, I know we're giving them a $30,000 grant, but I presume if we were doing everything that they're doing for that money, it might be more expensive, or maybe it's less. What's your...
Significantly expensive. Just making the assumption that one would need at least, current planning staff would not be able to do it. We provide a lot of support to the Old Tacoma Business Association, have individual staff members who work with the Design Review Committee and the Economic Restructuring Committee to help those projects. And then we just partner wherever we can. And then like the loan program for the parking and the streetscape stuff. But to have someone on staff do what the executive director does, it would take at least one person, if not more. And based on the level of responsibility for those activities and the job classifications that we have, it would cost anywhere from $70,000 to $95,000 a year for salary and benefits for that particular staff person. And that's not including the operating costs with that. Mm-hmm. To be most effective, it would be appropriate to be on site, like the Crossroads, Tacoma Langley Crossroads. They have an office up there. If you're going to effectively work with businesses in a defined area or place, it's most effective to be where they are and where they can access you. So there are implied costs there in terms of leasing an office or things like that. If you were to decide not to do this and you wanted us to take a more active role, we'd have to, there would still be additional staffing costs here from a physical standpoint, because we'd have to find a place to put them. And then we'd have to, we're just not set up to add another person on staff.
Okay. In the Old Tacoma improvements, the $92,000, has anyone really been inquiring about or accessing that loan?
We're in the process of wrapping up the administrative regulations for that, and then we're hoping to The plan is to market it with a specific deadline as far as the applications. There are a couple of properties along that stretch that we have internally earmarked as potential candidates based on the parking that's available and the condition of the particular parcel. And we'll be working with the Old Tacoma Business Association to also promote that. The plan is to get that information out by the end of May. And then those funds are loan funds, but the city doesn't keep them. They go to the state. Because
When they're paid back, you mean?
when they're paid back.
Okay. On the gateway signage, is there any aspect that might, to that, where the boundary stone on Maple Avenue, there's this historic boundary stone on Maple Avenue, would be highlighted in any way with signage, or is that not part of the current plan?
It's not part of the current plan, but the sign system that was adopted by the council when this project was initially formulated or formalized includes historic interpretive signs. What we have done is forwarded that information over in those plans to Historic Tacoma. They were hoping to do, you know that interpretive sign that's on the corner of Tulip and Maple? Up by the carriage, up by the carriage house. To use this to replace some of the interpretive signs that they have, because while they're very well done and well written and interesting and all of that, they've weathered badly over the years, and we were hoping to be able to replace those. If a decision was made to install a sign, what I would like to do is to work with the Historic Tacoma and see how we might be able to coordinate that using designs that have already been approved and developed. So that's a really long way of answering yes, you could do it.
Okay.
Sorry.
I'm not pushing for that immediately, but I do think it would be a nice thing to do eventually.
It hadn't occurred to me, but yeah, it would be a good fit.
The Park Avenue, I just want to make sure the Park Avenue,
We'll be done this fiscal year.
so I just want to make sure it's done this fiscal year, and that's why it's not, we don't anticipate it carrying over.
We don't anticipate ever having to talk about that again.
Well, I'm hoping not ever.
I have a big pile of Park Avenue paper, and I really want to get it off.
And then lastly, I guess, has there been any thought, are you hearing anything about new ways to work with HUD? My sense is we have a much more aggressive and, I won't say intelligent, but motivated secretary of HUD. And it seems like already in the stimulus, they're looking at rolling out new packages and new programs. So I don't know if there's a way we can proactively talk to either our local HUD administrator or directly to the HUD office here in terms of accessing funds, trying to be a pilot site for new ideas around energy saving, green design, any sort of affordable housing programs.
Linda Walker, who many of you have probably met, heads up the affordable housing activities and has been going to a lot of meetings for that very purpose in terms of identifying what the funding possibilities are and how we might be able to access them. HUD has been great, as well as the state of Maryland and Montgomery County, in terms of providing us access to information and working with us to increase our staff capacity so that when those funds are available, that we'll have the technical expertise to take advantage of that. So yes, our intent is to continue to monitor it and be as proactive about it as possible. Again, one of the challenges we have is that because of the size of Tacoma Park and the way that many of those funds are structured, with the focus being on the funding going to the state and then the county and then potentially down to the municipalities, that it's important that we continue to maintain those contacts with the county and the state to make sure that they don't forget us.
Other questions? Councilmember Robinson?
Hi.
Hello.
I'm looking at the code enforcement page in the budget. Oops. And then I'm looking at
In the budget book?
the budget book.
Okay.
And then I'm looking at the clean and lean abatement program that you mentioned earlier. And the budget for the clean and lean abatement program is $47,000. and it says code enforcement. And my first question on that is that 47,000, does that become a lien on properties, or is that our staff costs?
That would be direct costs associated with a specific property and would become a lien if the property owner did not repay the city.
Okay,
So it does not include any staffing costs.
Okay, so that 47 is to be reimbursed one way or another.
Correct.
Okay, and then, so that answers that question. And then on the code enforcement page, I see there are 3 full-time code enforcement people.
Correct.
And on the left-hand side, the wages, is that the $202,000 under wages?
Yes.
Okay, and then below that, there's a line for services and charges of $227,000, and I'm wondering what that is.
About $178,000 of that is the contract with Montgomery County for the inspection of rental properties, so that's the bulk of that amount.
Okay, so 178 goes to Montgomery County, leaving 50,000 for something else.
I think it's the
That-
abatement program, isn't it?
That includes the code enforcement contracts, it includes inventory expenses, office supplies, a variety of things that, other services and charges includes the contract with the county, includes the clean and lean because it falls under that category.
Okay, so
And
that's that
then
47.
miscellaneous expenses for supplies and equipment.
Okay, and just for my own education, the 3 full-time code enforcement people, do they work with the county in that, in inspecting rental housing, or are these, how are these code enforcement folks different from the county code enforcement folks?
None of them conduct any inspections of any rental housing at all.
Okay, what do they do?
They will, our program assistant coordinates the licensing of all of the properties, so all of the paperwork, going through and monitoring that the property owner and the property has satisfied all the requirements or the conditions that must be met before a license can be issued.
Okay.
They also take the lead on the landlord certification program and deal with general property maintenance complaints, call-ins, emails, all of that. The inspector that we have that's included in that salary figure does not deal with the county from a rental housing inspection program, except perhaps to say, I got a call and a complaint about this particular property, go out and inspect it, or that type of activity. And then the supervisor for the division coordinates on a daily basis the inspection, is in contact with the county on a daily basis to coordinate the inspections of properties. We may have information that they need in terms of how to contact the tenant or the landlord. There may be special circumstances going on that we need to advise the county of. We also need to make sure that someone is actually passed the inspection so that we can finish up the license review and issue the license. And so they meet with the county on a monthly basis to just talk about issues that have come up, identify problem properties, that type of thing. And they oversee the database that we've developed, they oversee the issuance of the licenses, all of that. But none of them actually go out and inspect properties.
Okay, so they're, in a sense, backup to the county in a certain way. Well, maybe that's the wrong word, maybe backup. Maybe some of it's backup to the county, but it's
They're kind of like the county's boss in a way, because they oversee the work that the county does to make sure that they do it the right way.
Okay.
The other thing that I should let you know about is that under the county's contract, we do not have any legal fees associated with this, so many of the property owners end up going to court. And those costs are incurred directly by the county. The city has no costs associated with that. And having been in court a lot with a lot of property complaint or code violations, that can eat up a whole lot of time. So that's another added benefit of the contract with them that's not as evident by just looking at the numbers.
Okay, that's a good segue into my next question, which is...
Dan, can I just ask a question that was very specifically related to, is that program assistant that oversees the processing of the licenses, is the cost for that person in that calculation you're doing about covering of the fees?
Right.
Okay. Thanks, Dan.
And again, I'll go back, it's been over a year since I did it, but I'll go back and check, but it should cover.
So that segue was to the next question, which is, to what extent do the legal fees associated with COLTA or other issues that involve housing reflected in this document?
They're not.
Okay, and there's some guesstimate about how much that is.
Yeah, it's in the legal services are actually in the general government department budget you'll be talking about later. I know we have spoken before, and we can get you a report, which could actually provide that for you on an annual basis if you'd like. I just need to talk to
My
the
recollection is,
bookkeeper for Silver and Pearlman.
my recollection is it's in the $50,000 range.
That's mine as well.
Okay. So a couple more little ones. The safe routes to school. Last year, I remember asking and hearing that was...
No, go ahead.
Huh?
Go ahead.
That was paid for by a grant.
Yes, it is.
Is that paid for by a grant again this year?
Yes.
Okay.
We have Lucy's grant staff, so there are no staffing costs incurred by the general fund or any of the other expenses.
Okay. And the last thing is just a point to make for all of us, I think, and that is that in the jobbing out of things, which is my reading is the Survival Guide, MANA, Victory Towers, the Ministries, Digital Bridge, and Old Town, really. It's kind of external, those monies go to external entities.
We have a lot of contracts for services and memorandums of agreement with a variety of different organizations that we oversee, but they help us make a lot of the projects that we have been tasked with possible.
Right, and those that I just mentioned, that comes up to about $68,000, my quick tally. So I just wanted to make that point and ensure that when you're tallying up those efforts that so that those are reflected in the list of things that are kind of outside of direct service provision from the government. Does that make sense?
Yes, and that's what we've tried to do. I think the list that we had provided to the council when you were talking about the community grants program, what we tried to do is to separate those that were paid for out of general operating money and note those that were paid for out of CDBG funds. But yeah, we have captured those in the past.
Okay, I don't remember. Some of these seem new to me.
They were new because the information we provided previously, Councilmember Robinson went back through FY09. Many of these projects would be new for FY10.
Got it. Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Siemens has two quick questions and a comment.
Yeah, I'll start with a comment, because I wouldn't want to disappoint you. It's about the gateway signs.
I thought I had, I was anticipating having this.
You mentioned tertiary signs for Ward 4. I believe we have one road that is on the border, so we would only need one tertiary sign. And on my way here, I passed that, and it's already been installed, so it looks like we have a budget savings there. You could drop that off of Ward 4.
That you just saved me $275. Thank you.
Great. We aim to please.
You're good at that.
There's been some discussion in the community recently, especially from Mr. Sherwood, who's here with us tonight, about the stimulus money. And I'm curious if we're doing anything to help the landlords or anybody else within Tacoma Park to get some of the stimulus money where possible. I know that we don't directly participate in that, but I think that there are some opportunities for some of the apartment owners. And along with that, I wonder, my second question is about foreclosure. If we are actively looking for any foreclosed properties within the city and trying to provide any type of assistance, or whether it be educational or any other type of assistance to those with properties that are being foreclosed.
Let me start with the foreclosure one first. If memory serves me correctly, there are about 30 to 35 properties in Tacoma Park that are in some stage of foreclosure. It could be, the more we learn about it, the more confusing it becomes, because there are all these different criteria and different steps that one goes through to get to this process. Linda Walker has become expert at reading the classifieds in all of the local newspapers. And if you walk in her office at about 8:35, she's reading the newspaper and going through and checking all the sales that are going on in front of the courthouse steps. Once we identify a property, either through that method or through connections that we've made at the county, who will send us on a monthly basis the latest and greatest list of foreclosures that, I think it's through the Consumer Services Division or something like that. We will add them to a list of properties to keep an eye out. That list is used by the code enforcement staff when it goes through and does the target inspection programs to just do a spin through and say, okay, does this look occupied or not occupied? If it looks unoccupied, then whenever they do their rounds for that particular ward, and that happens at a minimum once a week, they will just swing by to make sure that things look fine. It's kind of hard to tell sometimes, but you know, that the grass is being cut and that the property is being maintained appropriately. So that's from a property maintenance perspective. From Linda's perspective, once she learns of a property through a variety of different means, she then sends correspondence to the property owner advising or notifying that we've become aware of the fact that they may be at risk of foreclosure and losing their home, informing them of all of the resources that are available to them, and encouraging them to contact her for additional support and assistance. Linda has, Linda has, with the support of Montgomery County, gone to a series of trainings that have been offered by the Neighborhood Works. Yes, no. A national housing firm that does a lot of training, and NeighborWorks that does a lot of training on a variety of different subjects, one of which is homeownership training, and then more specifically foreclosure support and assistance. So she has to take a test, and once she gets through that test, then she will be a certified foreclosure consultant. So by going through and doing all of this, we have the technical expertise in-house to support, not necessarily serve as a counselor for each of these particular property owners, to point them in the right direction. And again, because of her involvement in the housing fair and all the other organizations that she belongs with, we've developed a pretty good network of partners at the county level, on the nonprofit level, where we can make those referrals so that we can provide, or at least put people in the right direction. That's for owner-occupied properties. When they are a rental facility and there's a risk of foreclosure, it becomes trickier because there are a whole set of other rules that don't make any sense to us, because the tenants are often not advised that this property is going through foreclosure until they can't turn their stove on because the gas has been turned off, or there's no water coming out of the faucet because the property owner has just walked away and not paid the utilities. So we work with them to the greatest extent possible to access funds to pay utility costs or shut-offs, identify organizations that can help them relocate or work to protect their interests, so that if they pay an outstanding utility bill on behalf of the absentee landlord, but using their rent money, that they're not at risk of the next owner coming in saying, you're 3 months in arrears, you're out of here, when the reality is that they've actually been, through their efforts, they've been able to stay in the property.
Just real quickly, do you have a feel for how many home foreclosures that Linda's actually working with the owners?
Some of them will contact us, others.
Right, and that's why I wondered if you had a feel for how many have contacted us.
I don't know. I could find out and get back to you on that one.
Okay.
One thing with the economic stimulus package that we have noticed is that there's a greater interest in the homeownership programming that we're offering. For example, on And we've been using that as sort of a promotion for the homeownership classes that we offer on a periodic basis, both in English and Spanish. And this Saturday, we usually get, about 8 to 15 people. We've got over 40 people that are registered for this class because of some of the economic and stimulus things with the $8,000 credit. So things like that we try to promote and try to increase people's awareness of it. As far as assisting larger multifamily property owners, the Franklin, for example, we contacted them with the information that Mr. Sherman had provided regarding the environmental access to funds that would make a property more energy efficient. And because there were like 3 properties in Tacoma Park that actually qualified for those funds because of its structure. And they are in the process of going through and submitting that, watching to see when the rules and the regs are issued, and are intending to submit an application for that.
Have you contacted all 3 of those property owners?
Yeah.
All right. All right, thank you.
And I've got 2 quick questions. And my one comment is, I was glad that Councilmember Wright asked you about the $30,000 for Old Town, because I was going to ask the same question.
It's a really good organization, and it's, from our perspective, it's funding well spent.
I agree, thank you. The Safe Routes to School, it says that in the proposed budget, it comes from a special revenue fund. Is all of that money tied to the speed cameras, or is that something else?
None of it's associated with the speed camera at all. This is through the Federal Transportation Administration.
Okay, so it's the same process, the same funding as has been the case in the past.
Right.
That didn't transfer over to the potential new source.
No.
And is that funding that has been in the past and is proposed to be in FY10 going to be something that will likely continue beyond FY10, or is there a reason to think that efforts there might need to transfer over to the potential new funding source?
We have been advised, or it appears that the agency that makes these funds available is veering off more towards capital projects as opposed to the programming, which from our perspective is extremely beneficial in terms of working with the kids of the ages that participate in these programs. So I don't know if it would qualify. It's not a city expenditure, and perhaps it would from a programming perspective. And frankly, in the past, you haven't spent a whole lot on sidewalk replacement. And the money that's included in the budget here, the $171,000, is not general funds, and that would all go for sidewalks. So we've had a long discussion about different projects. And sidewalk replacement, I understand it is something that could be completed using the revenues generated by the speed cameras. I would like to think that the continuation of the Safe Routes to School program would qualify as well, but I'm not sure that's as clear cut.
Okay, thank you. And the other question was just kind of getting back to that earlier question about the property inspection and how those costs are covered. And there was something, I didn't find it quickly looking for it, but there was some discussion, I don't remember when it was in this cover memo or in the budget itself, but some discussion that the city manager had as part of the rebate task force about other areas of the county that do receive annual inspections and don't have to pay for them. And could you just speak about that for a minute?
Sure. Sarah might probably knows more about this than I do, but most rental properties in the county are inspected once every 3 years. The county has identified certain target areas, and the ones that are more down county are Wheaton and Long Branch, where they are doing annual inspections. Those 2 areas are the target areas for a wide variety of programs coming out of DHCA, as I understand it.
And was there any discussion with them about what it might do to make us a target area?
It really wasn't the major focus of the task force work, since that was focusing on tax duplication.
Is that a discussion that we should consider having?
If the council would like, certainly.
I don't know that it matters that much, because I assume we would also have to give up the
We'd have to give up the revenue.
license
Right.
fee, some of the license fee, right? So it might end up just being a wash.
Yeah, and
Councilman
as a result of that conversation, I wasn't sure how that would play out, but I didn't know if it deserved any more thought as to a possible scenario where it might be something we would want to consider.
I bet they're not paying for it out of property taxes. I bet they're paying for it out of their
They're paying for
rental
it, they're
licensing
paying
fees.
for it out of fees, that's correct.
Right.
Which is why it's not eligible for a tax duplication payment.
It's our understanding that the license fees that are collected by the county pay for not only the code enforcement and the licensing inspections and the licensing, but also their landlord tenant and their OLTA, which is their equivalent of COLTA, all out of the fees that they generate. So we've been told, even though we don't always believe it, we've been told that all the fees cover those costs and there are no property taxes in any of those activities.
So as long as we assume that our fees are covering correctly identified costs, then there's no reason to mess with it.
That's correct. I think what we have tried to pursue through the task force, since it is somewhat broader than tax duplication, was the programming that the city does in affordable housing. And one of the requests that I made, and we gave them a formula that I could certainly share with the council, but it was essentially a portion, I think about half, Sarah, I think that's what you and I worked up, of Linda Walker's salary, mainly because, we figured there was about half of the time that she spent, that it was kind of a partnership arrangement with the county where we felt like county residents were participating in those programs. We had also asked for reimbursement for some of the home ownership programs and other things that we did. So that's one of the requests that's pending while the task force is trying to wrap up its work.
Yes, that slow wrap. And Councilmember Clay had one final question, and then you can get out of the hot seat.
This question isn't related to housing, it's about economic development. There's been a few folks that have mentioned the Old Town Business Association, and I actually had the pleasure of meeting with them this afternoon. And we talked about a few things, and one of the things I talked about with them was a way to stabilize funding, so it really doesn't come up as a line item out of the general fund every year, and also to address the issue of equitable support for the various business districts across the city. And it's unfortunate that Doug and Ruben aren't here this evening, so I'll put a little bit of their agenda out on their behalf. And so one of the things that I was interested in, and I'm not looking for a really long answer tonight, but if it would be possible to find a way to have a dedicated tax stream, either through the, some portion of the rate of the commercial property tax, some other kind of a tax mechanism or a business improvement district, but essentially that we did across the city and then zoned out the different commercial districts so that there would be a standing fund essentially. That,
kind of a super CDA?
yeah, but that they would get the funds relative to what was generated in their different districts. So I would like to pursue that as a sustainable plan for generating funds for them, and like kind of a dedicated fund, so that we're making a statement like this is what we're going to dedicate to these folks year after year, and that it would be equitable across the city.
You had talked about doing that with affordable housing. So it's possible. We'll have to do some research.
Okay.
I think a lot of it would be a policy decision on the part of the council.
The nice thing about that also is that the other half of the revenue that OTBA generates is from dues-paying members, but it's optional. So there's businesses in the Old Town that don't pay the dues and benefit from all the work that OTBA does. So it's not like a bid now where it's not really optional, right? And then people.
Right. Well, you could do it on. I know that they pay some personal taxes, but the property. It seems like property taxes are generating income, and I think they all have to agree to become part of.
If you want to do if you wanted to do a business improvement district, or what they call a commercial management district, which is what the Tacoma Langley Crossroads is, there has to be a concerted effort on the part of a majority of the property owners within the defined area to agree to this fee structure. And then their tenants, or themselves if they actually operate the business out of that property, have this fee that they're billed. It's a mandatory billing, but it's not part of their property taxes, and some of them are very good about paying and others aren't. So there's, and then it becomes incorporated, that whole fee structure and the district boundaries are established and codified in the city's ordinance. So there's a whole process, but it's at the it has to be initiated or blessed by a certain percentage of the property owners that would be affected by it.
And I know that with the CDA having that structure, that there are still issues in terms of collecting.
There are issues in collecting, and with the CDA, the way the ordinance was originally written, there's no escalator clause in there.
Right.
So they are at the same budgetary levels that they were when the organization was initially established. So they've been pretty flat as far as revenues.
But we control the property tax. We could designate whatever it might be, a penny or 2 pennies or whatever it would take to generate the amount of revenue that we were looking for to provide support in this kind of the same way that we provide it to OTBA to support them, but as well as some of the other areas.
I know that other jurisdictions have done it for affordable housing, whether it can be done for economic development purposes, I don't know.
Well, let's check it
But
out.
we can check.
Yeah, because I know Fairfax County just did a penny for housing.
And they
Right.
just eliminated it.
I know.
And they eliminated it?
Yep, in this budget.
Well, we want a more sustainable plan than that.
It depends on the council.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And in the interest of helping staff to get home, I think we'll do communications, and then we'll take our break and do general government.
Woo-hoo.
So, yeah, come on up. We're ready to communicate.
You all have snacks.
Well, what do you want? Here.
Okay.
You want
Yeah,
Doritos?
just push your mic away when you're crunching.
Fig Newtons?
Okay, well, good evening. Let's see, as you know, in my little department, we have the cable channel, we have the website, we have the city newsletter, we have regulatory activity, and we have media and public relations. I tried to highlight for you in my paper budget presentation some of the things that we have done over the past fiscal year, in particular how they relate to your priorities that you've identified in the strategic plan. As the kind of a service organization, we are all about getting the word out in every means possible, every activity of city organizations and community organizations which are sustainable, economic sustainability, environmental sustainability, livable community, and one of your important sentences in your strategic plan is getting the word out about where tax dollars go. Because we can do all the good works that we want to in this organization, and if people don't know about it, then they want to know where's our money going. And so we're trying hard to do that. One of the things that we've had going this year in cable and is going to continue over to next year is a result of the franchise that we have with Verizon, which has given us some income, capital equipment income that we've never had before. It's in the Special Revenue Fund. It's dedicated towards that support of the PEG channel, the Public Education Government channel, which is what City TV is. And we're allowed to spend that on equipment and facilities. It's not part of the general fund. And it has grown in a way that unanticipated in previous cable franchisers. So Lonnie Frugal has turned into Lonnie, let's actually be sensible about some equipment purchases. And we're able to join the digital millennium, and we'll be spending some money on the auditorium renovation on the AV portion of it, of course, and it'll be a more comfortable comfortable room for people to use. You won't have to get up off your chairs to see a presentation,
And will we have to do that?
Well-
Or will we get on-off switches?
You know, I don't know about the particular mics that have been spec'd, but that's something for you to have an opinion about. An on-off switch requires you to remember to turn it on and remember to turn it off. And that is something I think that some input from you is, I know that over the years, different council members have had opinions about that particular one. So I'll be curious to get some input from you offline on that, to see if you want to do that. The voice-activated ones that I've been familiar with were not always perfect. And then one has to remember, you know.
Just put all the on-off switches in front of the mayor.
That's a whole nother policy discussion, isn't it?
Yeah, you can have a thing where we push a button to say we want to talk and it lights up over there and then you can, isn't that how the county council?
Well, a lot of places do that, yeah.
Yeah, the request system.
And it goes to the public speakers as well, those kind of systems. One of the other things that we decided to do is what you may or may not know is upstairs in the control room where all the equipment is are two primary functions. One is the control room for live council meetings. The other is playback, okay? And that's how you see what's on the channel. We upgraded our playback system this year to a digital server so that we're no longer taking 6 tapes and 6 tape decks, and once a day a human has to change them. We have a huge server with lots of storage. It does have a different level of operation, is that somebody's got to program that, and we've got to sit there, and it's a database, and you have to say what goes at 8 and what goes at 9, and that has been occupying some of my staff's time getting that system together. But we are adding all kinds of things from, for example, folk festival performances from 99, 2000, because that's evergreen. It's very cool to see older performances from, you know, our history of our folk festival. One of our livable community indicators, as far as I'm concerned, is a big part of the community in Tacoma Park. Let me see. Barb doesn't want me to sit here and yammer all night, but we are going to move our control room down to the room which used to be Deborah's office. You know, that little office that's in the dance studio. And that way, when there's an issue, my staff can dash 3 seconds from down the hall instead of 3 minutes across and over and down and around the building the way they have to now. That'll be useful for when the auditorium is renovated and we have a bunch of new programs going on here, because our plan is to have that staffed. So when you come and use the auditorium, there will be an audiovisual technician to come and make sure that you have a projector, that makes sure you have a microphone, whatever it is that the users of the auditorium need. There'll be somebody there, an attendant, to help facilitate your use of the technology. My rule now is that if an independent group comes in, if there's a staff person who is planning to attend it, then they can be the adult in charge of the projector or whatever. But if there isn't, we haven't been able to do that because we just don't have the resources. But if the room comes with a person, then all the different users will be able to have movies or PowerPoints or whatever it is that they want, microphones. It'll make it a much more user-friendly room for all kinds of applications. Which segues me to my next point, which is the goal for more kinds of programming from greater diversity of populations. I anticipate this room, as we've heard for the past 3 years as this project's been going on, there'll be kids in here, there'll be seniors, there'll be community groups, there'll be all kinds of people doing all kinds of things, and I see this as a great source of programming for us. Not everything will we be able to put on the air. They may not want us to, or they may be copyright issues or whatever, but I'm guessing the lion's share of cool events that will be happening in here will be additional programming for City TV. The Community Indicators Project, they're all gone now anyway, was one of the things that we did last year, and there's going to be more of that in here. It's been a place for nuclear free zone, for all the political things, for all the arts things, and I think it'll be very nice. And Barb will tell you that we're going to talk about the auditorium next Thursday, right? You're going to talk about it, so I won't talk anymore about that. The web, let's see, newsletter quickly. This was the first year that we've had 12 editions after a gap of some time with only 11 because it was a budgetary thing that got cut, and we put them back because of the survey, and that's been very popular. And I had highlighted in your packet some of the examples of things that have been covered the newsletter editor and I, of course, are well aware of the priority areas, and we're trying to make sure that local businesses are being covered and green initiatives, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I would say, in an era, just a side note, in an era of diminishing newspapers, having a monthly newspaper that is ours here in Tacoma Park is getting to be a luxury that covers the things that are important to the community. So I think I hope that as newsprint dries up all over the rest of the world, I hope we can still continue it, because I think it is beloved, and I get a lot of good feedback from the residents about it. Website, we are in the process of looking into various kinds of what they now call Gov 2.0 as a play on Web 2.0 and social media and networking. And I'm anxious to hear whatever thoughts you have about how we do that. I think there's some operational considerations. We want to have the voice of the city, and I've been collecting policy guidelines from other local governments to see how they're handling it. Some people don't really have policies, but they're putting it through their public information office, which is what Montgomery County is doing. They don't have a book that says these are the rules, but they have some sort of behavioral guidelines in the ways they put out public information. And let's see, I'll stop and let you ask your questions.
Councilmember Robinson.
Can you talk a little bit about the website? What's the vision for the future of the website, the city website?
Well, you may or may not be aware that our webmaster left for a new position in the middle of March.
I wasn't.
So we're operating a little bit low, since there's only 3 of us right now. But he had been developing a website, and I was getting that vetted through an external consultant, and we run into a few issues. And so in the triage of projects around here, it's on the back burner at the immediate moment. I see the social media applications as sort of integrated with that, and I think you probably have some questions for Abel, because some things are going to come out of his department that relate to the e-government things that are going to answer some of that question for you. But, there is a Twitter. The library actually is maintaining a Twitter right now. We have some interactivity. I was thinking of starting a Facebook for City TV, because it would be a good place to start, because I have little news. I've been talking about people. And so then there would be integrated between the Facebook and the city's website. One of the things I put in here was some of the examples of the one with the blue sheet. Mine didn't have the blue sheet.
Okay.
Some of the examples of the interactivity that we have now, it's very critical. Obviously, that's where the world is going. That's how you reach people. Most people aren't reading newspapers. They're reading RSS feeds. So we're going to continue implementing these things. The front page of the website, the main www.tacomaparkmd.gov, is used as the headline news. And that, whenever anything substantive is added to a department, there is a notice put on there, new update to landlord-tenant handbook or whatever. That has an RSS feed. It's also available via FeedBurner to be sent to your email, about 4 times a day. Actually, those emails come out whenever, which is a little obsessive, but I don't know how to change that yet. And anyway, it's pushed out, and in the two RSS. Let me rephrase that sentence. It's pushed out via RSS. The RSS is fed onto the cable bulletin board, so that it's on there. So I'm aware of the need to continue to implement alternative technologies. Websites are, you have to go and look at them.
Well, people go to the website to find, some people go to the websites to find specific kinds of information, and so good navigation is always important. And tell me if the redo of the website had that in mind, if navigation was one of the things he was paying attention to, or if it was something else that the redo that he was doing.
Well, we changed, on one side we've got some of the evergreen things. For example, a link to view City TV live, to the weather, to here's the latest newsletter, things that may get updated on a monthly basis, but they're always there and they're always on the scrolling down.
That's in the version that you were working on, which has been backburnered for now.
I just can't focus on it.
Okay, so I just was curious about kind of where you were headed. It sounds like you had that in mind. hot topics kind of thing was part of the new design. And you'll get back to that and
Oh,
pursue that.
absolutely.
Okay,
Totally.
thanks.
Councilmember Wright.
Two things I want to talk about. One is the website. It makes me a little bit worried that we're talking about Web 2.0 and social media, and I feel like we haven't even gotten Web 1.0 done well for the city, which is just basic presentation of information, navigation that Dan mentioned, search. You know, the search tool is better than it was when I first got on the council, but it still rarely brings up the things that you would want it to bring up when you...
The Google search tool?
Either one. I mean, the Google search tools improved it, but it still is not, at least I find frequently bringing up the thing that you'd want if you put, you know, if you're looking for I haven't done recycling specifically, but if you were looking for recycling and you put recycling in there, I'd be surprised if it really brought up the right page. So I don't think we should spend a lot of time on thinking about how we do 2.0 until we get 1.0 correct. And I hear that, you know, you were undergoing a revamp of the website and it's on the back burner now, but I think we should...
Side burner anyway.
Side burner. We should focus on that before we focus on... and I've said this before, I think there's a lot of members from the community who are actually very knowledgeable about this area, and a fair number of my constituents have mentioned their frustration with the website. And I think you could get a set of volunteers to participate in a short-term specific committee that fixed the website, and you could probably even get programming time from people. So I think we should think about that. The second thing is whether we could allow people to have your own sort of personal Tacoma Park account where you could opt into particular things. So opt into getting
Tacoma Park, what was the word you used, count?
an account.
An account.
So I could have my Josh Wright account, and I would go in and be able to set my preferences, which would include getting updates from the police department about safety, you know, emails from the police department. Maybe I could opt out of the paper newsletter if I didn't want it. I'm not sure how we go about mailing the newsletter out.
They're not individually addressed, they're bulk mail, you wouldn't be able to do that.
Well, under the way we have it set up now, we wouldn't be able to. Maybe it's too costly to do it the other way, but that people could not customize a whole web page, but there might be a set of things that they could opt into, including paying. You know, there's certain. It could be connected ideally to paying for your recreational services or your parking tickets or renewing your parking permit every year. So.
All those things are available, but individually, yes. Then you want to customize that.
I can't pay my parking permit online. No, you can't. You can mail in your parking permit payments if you want to, or you can come down here between the hours of 9 and 5. But if you work like most people do, you have to take time off to do that, or you have to do it by snail mail.
You get a ticket, then you can pay it online.
Tickets are paid online, yeah.
Other questions? Thank you. We'll take a short break.
We're going to have a
Don't let them know.
Tacoma Park lights on 8 Tacoma.
Okay, I think we're sufficiently stimulated. Sugar and piano. So now we're ready to do general government, and we're joined by some of the folks who would be here. I gather Karen Hampton is,
Under the weather.
and therefore
So Abel
she-
and I are going to try to pinch hit for some aspects of Karen's budget. With the council's concurrence, obviously the general government department kind of covers sort of a wide variety of functions, and so there's a number of us who have responsibility for the individual budgets within the overall general government funding. What I thought might be helpful is just, there's a couple of us, I guess, who had a few things to say about some of the individual division budgets. We can try to provide some highlights and then certainly answer any questions the council may have. So, Abel, you want to start?
Yeah, the IT department, information systems. This year, we're going to be focusing on disaster recovery. It seems to be that's one of the issues that we want to be responsive to and we want to be sensitive to. So disaster recovery and making our network more secure is one of the focuses, and it's part of my work plan, part of what I'm doing for my folks. The other one is making government activities more available to those online. And those are all things that the council has said we want to do. A lot of the software that we have already has that capability. We want to train our staff. We want to put a lot of the things that we do online. We're doing a lot of that now, but we want to increase that. One of the things that we want to do, that we want to schedule, is a vulnerability test and a penetration test. So we want to get a third party in here to come in and try to hack our system. We're also increasing our backup capabilities. The council approved on Monday some software and definitely enough hardware to do this. I've gotten the experience has taught me, let's get the service with some software. So we bought servers, but we also bought software that's going to help us do that. Be ready for disaster recovery and backup. The folks that were using I-365 is a Seagate company, and they've been in backups and recovery for a while. What else? I want to be short, and I want to get your questions. I think that pretty much covers it. We're also, on the Karen's side of it, council approved early on this fiscal year the Employee Access Center and the applicant tracking software. That's going to be coming online this summer. We got the training scheduled for June 25.
What's tracking software?
It's called applicant tracking software. So as people apply for jobs, it's going to track them. We can get their resumes and process them, put them through our procurement process. And the Employee Access Center is going to allow our employees to access their benefits, be able to print W-2s. When we have our open season, they'll be able to go and select benefits. In addition to that, the human resources folks have been interested for a while now in making that part of an entrance where we place online the city policies, where we place online the procedures, information for our staff, and they're going to manage that, and that's also going to live in the same server. It's going to be part of this Employee Access Center. Did I get everything from her? Do you want to ask questions? Do you want?
Yeah, question. What is that noise?
Yeah.
That was your phone.
Well, if it's my phone,
It was.
let's hear it. No, it's not my phone.
Questions, Councilmember Robinson.
Abel, tell me or tell us what your staff is like and how you work during the day. How your staff works.
Well, there's two specialists. The information system specialists, and we try to focus on the customer service. I got one of my staff guys is at a phone. A lot of times, unless something's happening. And when he's the one that's, his primary for us is documenting requests for services, requests for,
From
I
within
can't log
staff?
in, from staff, right. Then my other person, other staff member, he is scheduled to visit every department. Every day he's got a different department to go to. And that's just routine unless there's something happening, unless there's a network down problem, there's a problem that impacts a group of people, or that impacts more than one person. And then a lot of times, an impact like that will generate us to do a little research. We have to find a solution for that problem, so that we'll have to either, both of us will focus on it, or one guy will focus on it, but I can assign to work on some research and development, basically, or researching an issue.
Okay, and roughly how many computers are there that you guys are responsible for?
I believe it's over 120, it's 130, I thought.
Okay, and do you keep track of how aged or not aged they are and have a replacement schedule for them?
It's 155.
Our replacement schedule is every 4 years.
Okay.
We try to replace it. And usually, if you've got a special need, sometimes we'll go before that, and then we reassign your not-so-old machine to somebody else. But now, everybody that needs a computer's got one. And for a while there, we were handing down to a lesser or not, a user that wasn't as powerful as the system. But now everybody that has a computer, everybody that needs a computer has a computer. So now we're really on our four-year schedule.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Wright?
I'm just wondering where we are at in terms of the issue tracking software that we put in. How's that working? I noticed when I was on the city website the other day, it exists. I didn't actually know I didn't see any announcement that it was functioning yet. I haven't tried using it, but how is that going? What are we finding related to that?
I think it was announced. I don't know. You want to speak to it? We did it.
Lonnie might be able to help me out, but I know we put it in the status and information report. We do have a very large kind of display ad, if you will, in the issue of the newsletter that's just getting ready to come out in about a week.
It is pretty prominent in our website if you go to the main page. And the usability, it's not as widely used as the other software was after some time. And I think Lonnie might want to talk. She might even have some numbers. But we're hoping that this month's issue will probably get the word out.
There was a status report the week that it came out, which has been a couple of months. There was an article, a little mention in last month's newsletter. We've got, there was a headline on the website about it when it came out, and that's still on there. We've changed the logos to this My Tacoma Park. I don't know if you've seen that. That's what's on every page of the website now. And we've got ads running on the bulletin board, screens, and we're cross-promoting it. I think one of the things that we talked about is that you, the council, can be a good tool in helping to get residents used to using it. As people bring you things, you can say, gee, I can enter that into my Tacoma Park for you, or if you want, you can do it yourself, and you can direct them to that logo that looks like a parking sticker. I think you can help that. The usage has been very minimal so far. We ran some reports a couple days ago just to check, anticipating your question. Several people have stumbled upon it, but you can, and it's replacing action. What we did was we created a page. If you click on this logo on the web page, it goes to a portal page and says, here's our new service. We'd like you to use it. If you still have an action item pending, which there are still some in the system, it gives you a link to that. So where they used to look for the action button is replaced with this. So we're trying to get the word out.
Does it keep track of which ward the request comes from?
Does it keep track of it? I don't think so, unless they enter it.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it would be nice if we knew if somebody in our ward made a request.
Yeah, and some of them are just questions, and so it's not even word-based. It might be, and they're just giving an email address, because we've asked the users to give, if they want a response from us, they needed to submit a valid email address.
Sorry, I interrupted you. Sorry.
No, I'd be curious if we could add, along with email address, the option reward.
And then if we could have a copy sent to us if they put that in there, but I don't know if it's configurable, right?
No, that can be done. That can be done. To email the council member for that ward.
But that wouldn't require the individual to know what ward they live in, would it?
It would be, yes, it would.
Unless we had a database.
I would guess that, 80% of the people don't have any idea we have wards.
There is a tool on the website to look at what wards you are, street address listing by ward, so you can, but they're not linked at the moment.
Yeah, I'd have to probably talk more to Abel about this. I know on the recreation software, Abel, you might be able to address this, but I think because so many people didn't know what their ward was, it actually sort of, they could either enter it or it sort of can fill it in, because I think the listing of streets and the blocks of addresses basically would flow to that, because obviously it was important for the rec department and for the council to know what wards people resided in. So we can try to explore that.
I'll think that, well, okay, yeah. You can see that. That's not easy, as easily done as, especially in our city where the wards are half blocks, odd side, even side.
Didn't say it was easy.
Councilmember Clay.
How can we pay $17,000 in bank fees? It's an odd question, but.
That's Yvonne's
Because the bank charges for all kind of services such as lockbacks or.
It's not for keeping an account there, though. Because don't they hold all of our money and?
They don't do anything for free.
No, what they're doing basically, every service we get, like to send us our bank statements every month, to be able to go online and view our accounts, to make wire transfers, and
It's the lockbox processing. All the stormwater bills, a lot of them go
Yeah.
through the lockbox.
I see. Okay. Then who's our bank?
SunTrust.
Okay, thank you.
Can we ask questions about general, or do you want us to wait?
I think, Abel, is there anything else you wanted to add? I think Jess had one or two things she wanted to mention, and then I had one, and since Karen's not here this evening.
Sure. I just wanted to note that in the legislative budget or the election, the budget for the election, we budgeted $12,000 for the 2009 election, and that should cover, that'll cover a mailing to, one mailing to all registered voters in the city. It'll cover the cost for the election judges and the supplies and miscellaneous expenses involved in an election, print and copying and so on. The board will not be recommending a second polling place for this election, so there's no expense included for that. And we don't anticipate any costs for election equipment this year, so I believe that $12,000 will cover it.
Councilmember Robinson.
On the performance workload measures under city clerk page, it says that you anticipate 10 candidates for office processed in FY10 as opposed to 8 for FY08. I was wondering where you came up with that number.
It's wishful thinking. You know, it's not personal, but when you're running an election, you really hope there'll be an election, just in terms of making it more interesting for the election administrators.
Okay,
but it's...
You haven't heard about all those candidates for what?
Yeah. I don't have any inside information.
Okay. And the same for the 20%, you're hoping that we'll have a better turnout, right?
Absolutely. We're going to take some steps to try to increase turnout, but it really depends on contests.
And the number of council meetings supported goes up from 8 from 08 to 10. And what are we having more council meetings than I wasn't aware of? Do Are we getting an August break this year? That's my real question.
Yes, I did looked at the calendar, and that was my guess.
Okay.
Is that, it's fewer this year.
There's a steady rise. It went from 36 to 42 to 44. I'm wondering, is this a trend? Are we going to have more council meetings?
Right, I think it just has to do with the calendar.
Okay. I'm not trying to make light of things. Thank you.
The other thing, if I could, I just wanted to note about the legislative budget, is that in the current budget and in prior years, in the non-departmental budget, which the council previously talked about, there were 3 boards and commissions that had designated funding. One was Arts and Humanities, the other was the Public Safety Committee, and the Committee on the Environment. When Jesse and I were talking about the legislative budget, I guess my feeling was that out of all of those, the Arts and Humanities Commission has a fairly defined program in terms of what they do with the funding that had been allocated to them. They pay the exhibitions director for all the art exhibitions here in the building. So that was the only commission that I really felt like there was a defined enough program that, at least in terms of what I would propose to the council, that I would leave earmarked funding for a board and commission. What we did in the proposed budget is take, basically in the non-departmental, there is no longer any strictly designated funding for the Committee on the Environment or Public Safety Committee. What we decided to do instead was to include $10,000 in the council budget, the legislative budget, just designated generally for council boards and commissions, and any board and commission that wanted funding would need to come to the council, basically as part of their annual work program, tell you what they wanted the funding for, and then the council could bless it or not bless it. But that is a change from the current year budget that I just wanted to call out to your attention. The only other thing, since Karen is not here, switching to the kind of the human resources budget, and we tried to highlight this on the agenda cover sheet. One of the goals that Karen and I talked about when she first kind of took over her new role after Wayne Hobbs retired was wanting to go through and do sort of a comprehensive review of both the section of the city code that deals with personnel as well as some of our internal personnel policies. Because of just the ever-evolving personnel law that you see both in Maryland as well as in a lot of changes at the federal level, we thought it would be helpful to get some consulting assistance to do that for people who basically do nothing but focus on what's happening in the personnel field, and basically make sure that our internal policies in the code, our union contracts, that everything is sort of linked and up to date. Included in the HR proposed budget is $15,000 for sort of the first phase of that effort. I would say that since this budget went out to the council, we've been doing a little bit more research. And I think as we go through the reconciliation process, I would appreciate it if the council would maybe consider allocating more funding towards that effort. I think it's probably going to be more expensive than maybe what Karen thought originally. We will come back during the reconciliation process with a specific proposal, but I think trying to get those policies updated, I think is very much in keeping with the council's strategic plan. And I'd like to make sure that Karen doesn't find herself short in terms of having enough funding to really go out and hire somebody and make some progress during fiscal year 2010.
Councilmember Wright.
I just wanted to check on the city clerk about how you're feeling about the integrity of the mock election. Did that all?
There were definitely some hiccups. It took longer to vote than, far longer to vote than would be acceptable. The Board of Elections is going to be evaluating everything, discussing options with them over the next few months. We think that it's likely that it's workable if we do it as an add-on to what we normally do. We don't want to do anything that's going to make it inconvenient, uncomfortable, unuser-friendly to vote, because that's absolutely important. So we're continuing to talk to them.
And then I was just curious, in the general management division, I'm just sort of trying to understand what the difference between the management assistant is, the executive assistant, the staff assistant, and the office assistant. It seems like a lot of assistants, and they may really have functions that are critically important to how we operate, but I'm trying to understand what
One
the
of the,
difference is there.
yeah, I agree with you. One of the things that we were going through the compensation and classification study was trying to basically take all these myriad of titles that we have for our administrative support personnel and see if we could collapse them somewhat. Right now, there are 2 employees who staff the reception desk during the day hours that are accounted for in general management. One is a staff assistant, one is the office assistant. So their primary duties are staffing the reception desk both on the 3rd floor and the main reception desk just outside this chamber. The executive assistant is Peggy Washington, who I think all of you know, who provides certainly some administrative support, definitely to the mayor, to me, and to the deputy city manager, and certainly helps with council travel arrangements and things of that nature. The management assistant is Vanita George. Basically does a lot of work in terms of, she does staff some of the boards and commissions. She's a staff person that I think all of you know was assigned to H6. She is a staff person who is currently assigned to the missing sidewalk study and the ADA accessibility study. She's also the ongoing staff person for the Safe Roadways Committee. So she does a lot of general management support to both the deputy city manager and myself, and also handles some risk management functions for the city.
Thanks for clarifying.
Other questions? I can answer one that Councilmember Robinson had on the rolling agenda. The August break runs from July 28th to September 8th, which is actually 6 weeks.
Well, there's the 44 plus 6 makes 52. Except that we're having these double weeks here.
December.
Let's not get into the details.
December.
Right.
And
But thank you for clarifying.
And in just on one other housekeeping item that I'll do now because I'm thinking of it and I didn't remember it earlier. And I don't have the revised agenda with me, so I don't remember the language that we used, but we made a slight change to the agenda for the
It's for Monday night.
for Monday night, which is the 27th. It was the last part of that meeting was originally called additional reconciliation requests, but we changed that to,
Reconciliation discussion.
and that was partly to get at Councilmember Seaman's request for an opportunity for people to put items on the table.
Thank you.
And of course, anybody who wants to get anything in before then is welcome to do that. Are there any other
I think Barb did.
questions? Other things that you need to present?
No, I think we were just trying to hit the highlights, but certainly, it's not an insignificant budget, so if there's any questions that the council has, certainly, we've got most of the key people here who can answer them, so.
Going once, going twice?
Legal is, that's entirely the city attorney's budget, is that, or budget? associated?
That's correct. And that, those costs basically are kind of picked up if you go down below services and charges. We do have some contracts with the city attorneys, contractual legal costs being the largest of that group.
What else is in that $500,000 in services and charges?
I anticipated that as you were asking someone else their questions. Councilmember Robinson, I went back and did my little crib notes. The biggest is legal, which is about $200,000. Kind of IT, software licensing, tech support is $68,000. The cost of the annual financial audit is $35,000. The bank charges Councilmember Clay asked about are picked up there. The preparation of the city's general purpose financial statements and the comprehensive annual financial report. The cost of our lobbyist is picked up there.
How much does that cost?
We had $15,000 in this year's budget. We did put in 20 for next year, just sort of anticipating needing to continue to track what's happening in the legislature and given the amount of activity this year.
That's good, because we're going back to work on Jessica's eviction again.
Okay.
And did that,
It was money well spent.
That amount is an estimate, and then has the billing been in line with what our estimates were for this year?
Yes. That we only entered into a one-year contract. We will, truthfully, that was kind of probably a mistake on our part. Since this was the first year we did that, we will need to issue an RFP again. But I think it worked very well. I think it was, truthfully, with so much activity in the legislative session, I think it accomplished what we hoped it would, which is that we never had someone who was kind of positioned in Annapolis who could really respond very quickly. And that's worked out very well for us.
I think that was some of our best spent money.
Yeah, I agree. I think we would have been in serious trouble this legislative session if we had been relying on staff who have other duties, because they just couldn't be in Annapolis and be talking to people as necessary.
Councilmember Wright?
I just have a process question related to the approval of the budget. Right now, we're scheduled to have first reading ordinance on May 18th and second on the 26th. If for some reason we want an additional day to debate or discuss that, we don't have to approve it until the end of June technically, right? So it could slide back a week if we wanted to?
Right. The biggest problem that we have is we have to provide the tax rate to the county by the end of May. I guess the question is, we have always tried to have the ordinance establishing the tax rate and the ordinance establishing the budget move together for obvious reasons. But there is no flexibility in the date that we notify the county of our tax rate. If we fail to do it on time, we could find ourselves without tax bills not going out.
And is that a different, I don't recall that being the case last year. Was it later last year?
The county always wanted it by May 31st. Truthfully, we probably have pushed the envelope a little bit, and quite frankly,
they pushed back.
They pushed back, and they want something in writing, and they won't give us any more time. And they're not being difficult about it. It's because of the lead time that they need to get all the different tax rates into their system and basically get bills out. So that's what's pushed the schedule.
But by the city charter, we don't have to have it approved for July, to jump June 30th?
You have to have your budget, yes, approved by July 1st.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? We're adjourned.